Episode 129 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone doing? Before we start today's show, 3 questions for you to have a little think about before we start. First of all, can you give me 2 solutions off the top of your head for the expression in French? En proie au conflit, en proie aux guerres. Okay, second question. What is the interpretation station's standard, triumvirate of solutions for the verb entraver? Can you get 2 out of 3? And thirdly and finally, what is a good solution for the word engrenage? As in, pour mettre fin à cet engrenage. Okay. So just have a think about those. Now, so today's episode, it's kind of dedicated, if you like, to the students at the Alihun Academy in Lagos in Nigeria. So that's, in particular, I'm talking to Courage, Bisi, Alhamdu and Michael. Hopefully I've remembered all your names rightly. And the owner of that school, Alhamdu Academy, is Chris Emmanuel. So Chris is on LinkedIn. You can link up with him. So Chris asked me actually if I could give a lesson to his students there. He runs a school for interpreters out in Lagos. He wasn't able, sadly, to give me a plane ticket to go out in person to Lagos, but we did the next best thing via Zoom. Okay, well, can't complain too much. So anyway, guys, I know if you're watching this from Africa, I know that relative, obviously, to the population of Africa, there is a big dearth, I guess, of venues to go, of colleges, schools, universities to go and study the art of interpretation. But anyway, there you go. And Chris has got his own school there in Lagos. I will leave a link to that in the description box. You can go and check that out, see what he is doing there. And so anyway, what I thought was, because we had a class on Sunday. It was just before the Champions League final, actually. It was just before the Liverpool-Real Madrid final. And I prepared a text for them. We didn't get the chance to finish it. So it was from the Security Council. It was on the situation in Ukraine. You know, I decided we may as well do something that was very topical. And, well, unfortunately, that is the most topical thing at the moment. And it was a statement by Gabon, in fact. So I thought I'd take a look at the conflict, if you like, from the perspective of one of the African countries. So I know most of the episodes that I've been doing so far on the Interpretation Station have been like from Russian mainly. I think we've had maybe some France maybe on the situation there. But I thought it was interesting to get the perspective of an African country on the conflict there in Ukraine. It was taken from a Security Council meeting held very recently on the 19th of May. Perhaps you can see here. It's the French version of it. It was under the theme of maintenance of international peace and security, conflicts and food security. So it was really, obviously, a big issue at the moment are all these food supplies, aren't they? All these the blockages in terms of supplying grain to Africa and Asia, and this is obviously a big corollary of the conflict in Ukraine. It's coming increasingly into the spotlight, I guess, because so many of these countries really depend on grain imports from the region, from Ukraine, from Russia as well. So that was. So what we focused on was the statement by Gabon. Now, obviously, you'll be able to listen to the original of that statement if you go to the. I'll leave a link in the description box as ever, so you can go and practice it. Again, as usual, I advise you to go and practice the statement and then come and watch the episode. In fact, to give you if you really want to practice, like give yourself the background, because in this statement, you actually have a briefing from, he speaks in English, from the Secretary General giving an overview of the situation. So if you really want to replicate perhaps booth conditions, I would perhaps listen to that briefing by the Secretary General. That will give you some of the key vocab, and then you can go and try and practice Gabon and any of the other statements that fall within your language combination. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the actual text. I'm going to bring it up here and take you through it. I'll use one of these pens to mark the interesting points as we go along. And let's start. So here we go. So the Gabon ambassador is called Monsieur Adamo. So congratulations, President. So remember, Security Council always has a president, all right? For your initiative, pour l'initiative de cet important débat. Now, I think in English here, we would probably want to throw in a verb, okay? Maybe you can say it like that in French. I think it sounds a bit odd in English if you were to say for the initiative of this important debate. My inclination would be to put in a verb there. And now, what are our best verbs in English? So I would say probably convene or to summon this important debate. On the link between conflict and food security. Une problématique qui se pose avec acuité. Now, this depends how far behind the original speaker you are. If you've given yourself quite a bit of room, then you could probably convert in English. You can convert that into an increasingly pressing issue, an increasingly burning issue. But if you're right behind the speaker, maybe you've said an issue qui se pose avec acuité, which is becoming increasingly pressing, which is becoming ever more acute, perhaps. In terms of the emergency à laquelle se trouve confronté. Now, here's a good opportunity to take a shortcut. I mean, the actual speed of the delivery of the original, I think, is pretty, shall we say, middle of the road. I don't think he's going too fast, but he's not going slowly either, so it's somewhere in between. So, à laquelle se trouve confronté de nombreux pays. So, there might be a tendency, there might be an inclination here to wait after you've heard, what the subject is. Because we might say in English, the emergency that many countries are facing. But that means you have to wait, à laquelle se trouve confronté. Confronté is one of those verbs. It's quite useful because in terms of the subject and object, because the subject and object with that verb are pretty much interchangeable. Okay, what I mean is you can basically say, so you could say the countries are facing the emergency, or that the emergency is facing the countries, okay? Or confronting. If you want to use confront, you can do with that as well. The emergency confronting many countries, or the countries are confronting the emergency. It's quite good in that way, that verb, because as I said, you can the subject and the object can go either way. So what I might say here is, given the emergency facing many countries, en proie au. So there's that expression that I said at the beginning, en proie au. See, my stock solution here would probably be in the grip of armed conflict, just because of the way sort of the syntax is similar in French, en proie au, in the grip of. But I think you could also say that are plagued by, beset by. So those were the sort of ideas I had for that, en proie au. I thank the SG, let's just use the acronym maps, for his intervention édifiant. So I've got a few go-to solutions for édifiant. Often I'll say thought-provoking. You can say in English edifying, I guess, his edifying briefing, shall we say. Thought-provoking. Another sort of double-barreled solution that I have is like eye-opening, thought-provoking, eye-opening. Illustrative briefing, and I commend, je salue, I welcome his commitment dans la lutte contre la faim and combating hunger and insecurity around the world. By the way, at the end of this, I'll do a quick run through as well, a quick site translation, so that maybe some more ideas will come to me in the meantime. I also want to thank Mr. Beasley, Mr. Koo, and Madam Menker for their briefings. So expose, I tend to go with briefing, okay? By adopting on the 24th of May 2018, now a point I made here was if the guy's going fast, prioritize, okay? What's the most important thing here is the year in that date, okay? Or should we say, what's the least, the most important thing is the year, 2018. You really want to get at least May 2018, ideally. I mean, ideally, you get the whole lot, 24th of May 2018. But again, it all depends how fast the speaker's going, how you are feeling. With the dates, focus on getting the year at the very least, and then hopefully the month, then the day. By adopting Resolution 2417, à l'unanimité de ses membres, I think you just say here unanimously. I don't think you need to say the de ses membres, I just say unanimously. The Security Council, did you say the council? Okay, so this was, the thing that was asked me during the class with the guys at Alihun Academy, what sort of shortcuts you can take. I mean, we're in the Security Council, okay? If they're going to talk about a different council, if it was the Human Rights Council, then we would say it. But since we're in the Security Council, and if you just say the council, then it stands to reason that that you're meaning the Security Council. The council recognised the close link between armed conflict as factors aggravant de l'insécurité alimentaire, aggravating, exacerbating, compounding food insecurity around the world. En effet, again, this is a classic thing you can just drop in French when I very rarely bother to render that expression. Millions of people have difficult access to basic food products, and more than half d'entre elles, I'd say, you could probably drop that, more than half live in countries at war. Access to food est entravé. So, okay, there's one of my favourite verbs, if you like. My three solutions, do you remember? Them? Hamper, hinder, and impede. Those are my classic three solutions, okay? Hamper, hinder, and impede. By early combat, fighting is the best, most straightforward solution to go for with combat, which creates hunger and diseases inherent to malnutrition. Engendre, I guess you could say, which engender hunger, which lead to hunger. Selon l'Organisation des Nations Unies, so again, this was just asked of me, okay, l'organisation, you don't need to say that. Okay, that's how the full name in French for the United Nations, but in English that the word organization was dropped, I think, very early on in the history of the United Nations, and they just reverted to calling it the UN, the United Nations. So according to, now this is actually l'Organisation des Nations Unies pour l'Alimentation et l'Agriculture. This is FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization. So you can just call them, I think, according to FAO. Everyone pretty much knows who they are, but it's an important acronym to know. Okay, F-A. It's quite difficult writing like this. O. All right. Countries at war are 6 times more threatened by famine. Et 23 foyers de famine. Okay, so we were just thinking what a good solution for that is. And I think Michael came up with famine hotspots, and I thought that was very good. 23 famine. Usually when I hear foyer de conflit is perhaps the phrase that you hear most often which I usually talk about a hotbed of conflict. But yeah, hotspot, hotbed, good. Répertorié dans le monde, I would say, are documented, are listed around the world. Mass displacement of people, whether they découlent directement des combats, whether direct, you can maybe see here, whether directly as a result of fighting, or whether they stem from, whether they derive from fighting, or for the consequences of destruction, or the destructive consequences qu'ils entraînent, that they often say entail, or entraîne. You have the ENT at the start. so it would work here. The consequence of destruction that they entail. It wouldn't work perhaps every time. I guess the most neutral answer, the safest answer, might be that they result in, that they lead to, are factors qui favorisent l'insécurité alimentaire. Now, usually, my solution for favoriser is foster. Okay, I've mentioned this all the time in my episodes because I like the F. Okay, favoriser, foster, and it's the words almost look quite. So there's quite a lot of letters that they share. However, foster tends to have a positive connotation. Now here, the connotation is pretty negative. It's talking about factors that that lead to food insecurity. So perhaps foster in this case wouldn't be quite the mot juste. So maybe in this occasion it would be factors that lead to, that again result in food insecurity, or that cause food insecurity. Moreover, okay, so I was asked again. So par ailleurs. Okay, so one of the students asked me. So when I said, en effet is the kind of expression you can drop. Okay, now I was also asked, could you drop par ailleurs? Now I would generally say it would be better to have it. Okay, unlike en effet, I get the par ailleurs does add a certain connotation. It's saying on top of what you've just heard, there's this as well. So there is it's not just a filler expression. It does link the two notions, the two ideas together. The idea in the previous paragraph and whatever's going to follow in this paragraph. However, again, if you were in big trouble and struggling to keep up, I think it could be sacrificed. I think you could leave it out. You can, in English, there are ways and means of getting across connotations without having to use words. English is quite an expressive language, so you can put sort of stress on certain words to get across the idea that this is added to something else. I think, for example, mass displacement of people that stem directly from the fighting or from the devastating consequences that they entail are factors causing food insecurity. In times of armed conflict, civilian infrastructure is often taken for targets, and the significant repercussions resulting thereof. So it's not the end of the world if you were to leave par ailleurs out. So my advice would be, with something like that, ideally you want it in. But if by saying it you're going to lose stuff further down the line, then I think it's sort of expendable. Okay, it can be sacrificed. Civilian infrastructure is often targeted, and the significant repercussions that result therefrom, to reflect the idea of en, or again, if you've given yourself a bit of a gap to the speaker, if you let him go ahead, and the resulting and the subsequent significant repercussions on the provision, la fourniture, or just go with provision, of public services and agricultural capacities and production de transformation, I think, perhaps processing, or on transport, amplifie les crises alimentaires. So again, amplifie, it's a bit like, it's like we had aggravant before, so exacerbate food crises. I think you can also actually just say amplify. I think you can amplify a crisis. They amplify food crises. Transformation. I'm going to say that's processing. If you've got a better idea for transformation, leave it in the comments, okay? Moreover, in some cases, hunger is used as a weapon of war. Il n'est pas rare que... this kind of expression, so it is not rare for parties to conflict. Maybe in English it's just more easy just to put it in the affirmative. It is commonplace for, okay? it's typical for, or if you want to have that same notion of the negative, I don't know if English we would say it's not rare for parties to conflict. Maybe we would say it's not unusual for parties to conflict. To deliberately destroy food warehouses, burn fields, destroy infrastructure for the production and commercialization of food products, the denrées alimentaires. Okay, I think generally I've been sort of hearing just products. I think you don't say commodities. I often hear I remember seeing for a long time denrées getting translated into English as commodities. They block commercial roads. There's our favourite verb again: entrave, hamper, hinder port activities, poison wells, destroy fields or seed reserves. Consequently, IDPs, les personnes déplacées, just you feel free to go straight into the acronym IDPs, fleeing war zones. That was what was it Bissy who gave zone de combat. I guess if you do go word for word, it would be like areas of fighting. But I think war zones is a good solution actually for that. Zone de combat. I like that solution. War zones are often faced with the inability to access sources of subsistence. Again, we had a bit of a discussion over this word. Often subsistence is is about livelihood. Okay, but I think here it's a bit more basic than that. I guess these people, they're not, they aren't at the stage where they're looking for a livelihood. They just want to be able to survive. They want to just get. They're looking for the source of their next meal. So I think with subsistence, I think you can go with the cognate in English, subsistence. Okay. In recent years, climate change and more recently the COVID pandemic have compounded the situation of many countries in conflict. En situation de, I think you can probably just leave that out, many countries in conflict, by further complicating the nature of the challenges on the ground. These two factors, mis en évidence, have underscored the need for greater international coordination to respond to challenges of a global nature. Hunger around the world is one of these challenges because it exacerbates the weaknesses of states, it heightens the fragility of states. Again, we're hearing this sort of idea a lot in this statement, aren't we? Exacerber, aggraver, amplifier. This is an interesting sentence here coming up. Okay, si les liens entre les conflits. So it's a sentence that begins with the si. Now, there is a case often, sometimes you don't know which way that si is going to go. Is it going to be an if clause or is it going to be a while clause? And so often you can detect it from actually with a bit of experience. You can tell from the way it's said. So often, if the speaker will say si on va faire ça, then you know it's going to be like if we do this, then something else is going to happen. Whereas if it's a while clause, the sort of sound of that si is going to be si les liens entre le conflit et la fin. It's a much more monotonal. It doesn't really, the si doesn't stand out so much from the rest of the sentence. Okay, so with an if clause, like if, let's see, that if or that si tends to sort of stick out a bit from the rest of the sentence. And this is a weird one, okay, because if we just do it, let's go with the if, okay. If the link between conflict and hunger is today at the heart of the priorities of the international agenda and focuses the attention of the international community under the effect of the war in Ukraine, it is because its consequences threaten global food security and compound the situation in regions such as the Sahel, which faces recurring food challenges. So it's a bit of a weird one. I guess it's It's a conditional. It's a zero conditional. So when I say zero conditional, that means that usually, both sides are present tense. Okay, if it snows, we go skiing. But this is a bit different. This is almost as if it's answering a question. If we're doing this, well, then it's this, that, and the other. Well, that's the reason for that is because of this. So I think here, it's good here to play safe, in fact, because if you delete the C, how's that sentence going to read? You just go, the link between conflicts and hunger is today at the heart of the priorities of the international agenda and focuses the attention of the international community under the effect of the war in Ukraine. So you're following it along, and then you can see c'est parce que. Then when you hear the c'est parce que, it's only at that point when you hear the c'est parce que that you see which direction that whole sentence is really taking. Okay, because if you'd gone with the if, you're not certain. Is this going to be like? Is it going to go into the future? Is he going to say something that then something will happen? It's only there that you realise that first half of the sentence was really just setting the stage. Okay, so that's why if you just dropped the C and just played neutral and just said the link between conflict, blah blah blah, and then you full stop after the Ukraine, and then you say this is because its consequences threaten global food security and exacerbate the situation, blah blah blah. So this sort of sentence is a good argument for saying, unless you're absolutely certain that the C is going to be an if clause, you just play neutral, as it were. You just drop it, and then you adjust the sentence later as it becomes clear to you which direction it's going to take. La dynamique de mobilisation autour de la guerre. I mean, for dynamique, okay, so that's a word I find that you can sometimes leave out in French. In fact, I see it's going to be mentioned in the next paragraph as well. Because to be honest, I think here you could say just the mobilization around the war in Ukraine. Oh, by the way, so it's Ukraine. Don't call it the Ukraine. Just a little small point. Unless sometimes the Russians, I'm sure, would probably be fine with you saying the Ukraine, but unless it's Russia, don't play around with that, just say Ukraine. Also for dynamique, often it's like the momentum or the impetus would be the sort of stock solutions I'd have for la dynamique, but I think here maybe you could just leave it out. So the mobilization around the war in Ukraine, and here's l'élan, it's a similar idea, in fact, the impetus of solidarity, although I think in English we would perhaps say the spirit of solidarity. The spirit of solidarity aroused can be catalyseurs, so drivers. They often talk about the UN as drivers. So the mobilization around the war in Ukraine and the spirit of solidarity that it aroused, that it triggered, could be drivers for envisaging ways of preventing, faire face, tackling, or réduire les effets induits. What do we do with effects to reduce them? Okay, I mean reduce, in English, to reduce the effects, to mitigate the effects, to alleviate of armed conflict on food security around the world. L'implication plus résolue, more determined, more resolute involvement from the international community est indispensable, is key to put an end to this. Okay, this cet engrenage. I asked you at the beginning, remember, to have a think about that word. So really, engrenage, it's like to do with gears, churning gears, and the idea is like growing tension. So one of the ideas, it's quite wordy, is to say to put an end to this ratcheting up of tensions. What's another alternative? Maybe maybe in English we could just say this, to put an end to this spiral and prevent the emergence of new famine hotspots. But anyway, so that's the idea of, when you hear this engrenage, I want you to think of the sort of tightening, like cogs turning, tightening the noose, as things getting more tense. Often they'll talk about le désengrenage, which is the opposite, with a sort of like a thawing of tensions. Okay, but this engrenage is definitely things are getting tighter and tighter. Au-delà de la dynamique conjoncturelle. So often when I hear conjoncturel, I think short term, immediate term. You know, besides the immediate term situation. Or maybe you could say besides the near term, la dynamique challenges, besides the near term challenges, something along those lines. It's important to address the root causes of conflict and consolidate existing mechanisms for prevention and post-conflict consolidation. Similarly, the prevention and the resolution or the settlement of conflicts must fully integrate, must be able to, maybe I think you can just drop the pouvoir, must fully integrate the handling, la gestion, or the management of food crises in their approach, leur déploiement, in their approach. Maybe in this instance sounds a bit more, makes a bit more sense than deployment. Conformément, in step with the provisions of Resolution 2217 on food and security, Resolution 2573 on the protection of key civilian infrastructure during conflict, or Resolution 2417, which urges the parties to conflict to not entraver, here we go again, impede the proper functioning of food systems and markets in the aforesaid situation. These mechanisms offer sans aucun doute, so that's undoubtedly, I think is the best. Don't get, yeah, sans doute and sans aucun doute. So French natives might correct me, and I know I struggled to get the difference between them initially, but I think sans aucun doute, that is undoubtedly. But I think sans doute is better translated, better rendered as probably. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. An ideal framework that here favorisant. Okay, I think here it's a bit more the connotation is more positive. Fostering la sanctuarisation des stocks de sécurité des denrées alimentaires. So here I think it's like just the protection of security stocks for food products by offering technical assistance to countries considered fragile, as well as in the fields of reserve stockage. Stockpiling is probably the best word. There's stockage, and you hear stockage, stockpiling, as well as with adequate or appropriate technologies. Il va de soi que, okay, I remember learning that very early on in my in my years of studying French. I seem to remember learning that il va de soi que. I seem to remember that when I was about 10 or 11. I had my little French vocab book, and was it Mr. Boyce? Mr. Boyce. Lenny, we used to call him Lenny Boyce. Il va de soi que. It goes without saying that. Respect for droit international humanitaire, IHL, okay, you can just call it IHL, and the aforesaid resolutions, in particular Resolution 2417 on protection of essential goods and products for the survival of civil populations, is crucial. C'est le lieu de, okay, this is an expression that's used quite a lot, and I like just to have a sort of stock solution to that sets me up for the rest of the sentence, regardless of where the sentence goes. I tend to just say there is a need, okay, and then adapt. Okay, here it's le lieu de rappeler. There is a need to recall, okay. I know there is a need. It doesn't sound Shakespeare in English, but it does the job, okay, and it sort of, as I say, it sets you up nicely for whatever the rest of the sentence is going to be. There is a need to recall that states sont tenus de permettre un accès libre, so are called on to allow, or maybe are duty bound. I think that gets across the connotation well here. Are obliged to permit free, unhindered access. Okay, the sans entrave. This is something they talk about all the time. Accès libre et sans entrave. I would always remember that as a package, like free and unhindered access for humanitarian personnel for the supply of humanitarian aid whenever it is necessary to meet urgent food needs, and this without restriction or politicization. My country welcomes the establishment of the Global Intervention Group. I'll have to look up exactly what that group is called when I come to producing this episode, and I'll put it up on the front. The Global Intervention Group, I'm going to go for as I see it. In the event of food, energy and financial crises, destiné à soutenir, aimed at supporting vulnerable countries in the face of the scope and potential scale of the consequences of war, as well as the ongoing impact of the COVID pandemic. La portée, l'ampleur, I think, scope, scale, magnitude, these are good words to have to convey that idea, that meaning. Dans cet élan, again, this is one of these expressions. Maybe you could drop this if you were in a hurry. But okay, along those lines, socio-specific action must be envisaged or envisioned in the context of, dans le cadre de, that's my, seems quite a basic thing to mention, but just in case, I like to say in the context of, I think it sounds better English than in the framework of, in the context of multilateral responses in connection with bodies and special and the UN specialized agencies. Okay, that's a sort of set phrase. These agents spécialisés, specialized agencies, financial institutions, and regional organizations. Elles peuvent constituer une réponse efficace. They can constitute an effective response to combat the effects of conflict on food. Nous soutenons l'appel, so we support the call of the Secretary General, you can say the appeal of the Secretary General, for a global ceasefire, and condemn the targeting, le ciblage, the targeting of infrastructure de production de denrées alimentaires. So again, if you've given the speaker a bit of room, it's going to be the targeting of food production infrastructure, basically. Or, if you're right behind the speaker, the targeting of infrastructure for the production of food, as well as restrictions to humanitarian access. In conclusion, we urge the international community approfondir la réflexion. This is a phrase that used to trouble me in my early days, and someone just gave me a sort of a kind of stock response for it, if nothing else really fit, like to enhance our understanding. That same person said, often when you hear talk about a réflexion, think about the idea of food, and food for thought should come to you, and that's often a good salute when you hear a réflexion. Often the connotation is often similar to that we want to sort of conjure up when we refer to food for thought. I don't think it would work here. Maybe if it was something along the lines of, pour terminer, nous voulons approfondir la réflexion de la communauté internationale. We want to give the international community food for thought. It might work with that syntax. Here, I think just goes this, enhance our understanding de la responsabilisation et de la reddition des comptes. Well, to be honest, that's very similar ideas. I think you could just say accountability. Accountability is the key thing here in English, and I think that's just two ways of saying the same thing. So enhance our understanding of accountability for the crimes of famine. And here's our expression again, il va de soi que, okay, Mr. Boyce, Primary 5. Goes without saying that hunger and ravages at a health and social level are as devastating as they are dehumanizing. So there you go. That's a good statement, a good, interesting statement there from Gabon, giving the perspective of one of the African states on this issue. So I think that Gabon, tend to be more aligned with the West. So they're the only Africa. Are they the only well, at least they're the only French-speaking, the only francophone African country in the Security Council at the moment. But yeah, there's some good vocab there. I think this is an issue that is going to be increasingly discussed in the context, dans le cadre of the Ukrainian conflict. If you've enjoyed the episode, if you found the episode interesting, if you've learnt a few words, I don't know, enjoy is maybe too strong a word. Anyway, if you found the episode interesting, if you've learnt some new expressions, some new ideas, please do give me a like and share. You guys from the Alahun Academy, I hope that's given you a few more ideas to be getting on with. And all I can say is it's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure making episodes for you. And all the relevant links and things, both for the statements and for Alahun Academy, if anyone's interested, can be found in the description box. All that remains for me to say is that, by the way, and one last thing. So I'm going to be on holiday sort of second half of July, first half of August. If any of you watching here, if you've got your own schools, I don't know, wherever it may be, teach interpreting, give me a call. I'll give you a lesson free of charge. What the hell? If you're interested. There you go. Second half of July, first half of August. I could probably find some time to do something like that for you. I could use it to make a new episode as well of the Interpretation Station. Anyway, guys, so with that, all I have to say is that episode 129 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.
The train is now leaving the Interpretation Station. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Until next time, folks.